you're facing the Republican Marc Molinaro. You ran against him in 2022. It was a really narrow race there, a really close race there. Let's talk about what are some of the main differences between this year's campaign and 2022.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of differences. I mean, we went through a pretty chaotic redistricting process here in New York in 2022, late primaries, a whole host of challenges. But I'll tell you, the biggest difference from 2022 to 2024 is that my opponent now has a voting record. And he can say a lot of things, and he says a lot of things. Most of them are not true. But we can look at his voting record and see where he actually stands on things. So, for example, during the 2022 campaign, right after the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, my opponent made a whole bunch of promises about his position with respect to abortion access and reproductive rights. And then he went to Washington and he voted 13 times to restrict women's ability to get abortion services. So he now has to own that record. He said a whole lot of things about his commitments to lowering costs and securing the border and doing a whole host of other things. But I think most of your listeners can ask themselves, what has he actually delivered for you in terms of those issues? And we see a voting record where he opposed a bipartisan plan to secure the border. We see him taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate back checks and then turning around and voting to do what's best for their bottom line instead of ours. And so that voting record is the biggest difference from last time to this time.
What would you say is the most pressing issues facing the 19th congressional district today?
I mean, there's a lot of issues that I'm hearing about on the campaign trail, but one that I hear in particular in Sullivan County and across the district is we have to rebuild the middle class in this country. Right now, we are in the midst of an affordability crisis. I remember when I was growing up, and we used to, at the end of the school year, we'd put our school clothes on layaway for the next school year, and every week we would go down to Kmart and make the payments. And sure as anything, when the next school year came around, our school clothes were ready. I know what those conversations are like, sitting at the kitchen table and trying to make sure you have enough money for the utilities and enough money for the school clothes, and you'd like to save up a little bit for a family vacation. And right now, a dollar just doesn't go as far as it needs to for so many families. And so we've got to bring down costs. I think we start doing that by fixing our terribly corrupt campaign finance system. Right now, you have a situation where somebody like my opponent takes hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate PAC checks, and then when the votes come to Congress about stopping the price gouging, he votes for the special interests and not for us. We've also got to create a whole bunch of new jobs and economic opportunities across the region. I grew up in a blue-collar factory town where we lost thousands of jobs when the plants closed down. And we got to start bringing back really good manufacturing jobs, start making things in America again. People should be able to earn a place in the middle class by punching a clock and working with their hands and not have to go get a college degree.
One of the things that is affecting the Sullivan Catskills in our region here is housing. Housing affordability is a major concern. So there's a lot of development going on. A lot of folks, especially even before the pandemic, but mainly after the pandemic, folks are coming up from the city, living here in the Catskills, enjoying the area. What could you do to sort of address the housing crisis in this district, if you once you get elected?
Yeah, well, I think it's great that so many people from all over the country have discovered how beautiful and wonderful upstate New York is, but I also think it creates a lot of challenges with respect to the housing crisis. And so there's a couple of things that I would like to see Congress do, a couple of things that are part of my plan to bring down the cost of housing. One of them is that we're currently in a situation where you have these hedge funds and private equity-backed firms on Wall Street running around gobbling up single family homes and then jacking up the rents and jacking up the prices on them. And the way I see housing is it's something that we should be looking at as a basic necessity. We should be looking at housing as the way to get a roof over the head of families and not something that Wall Street is using to rip people off. And so I want to ban Wall Street from buying single family homes across upstate New York. Those homes should be homes for families, not profit centers for Wall Street. That's one thing. And then the other piece of this is, look, we just don't have enough housing stock. This is a basic supply and demand problem in a lot of ways. We don't have enough housing stock. And to me, the solution to that is build more housing stock. And I would like to see us make a significant investment in building new affordable housing. And when I talk about affordable housing, I mean not just affordable housing for low income folks, but also for the middle class. It's so hard right now for so many families to make that down payment and and get a place, middle class families to get a house. So we should build more housing stock. We should do it using our local labor unions, our local trades, so that it's good wages and good benefits that are staying in the community. And we should do it in a way that uses the best environmental standards, so that we're also fighting climate change in the process.
Now, let's turn our eyes to the opioid crisis. Fentanyl trafficking is a major concern across the country. And right here in Sullivan County, we were listed the highest overdose rates outside of New York City. We were recently designated the HIDA designation of a high trafficking area. What can you do and what policies can you support to address this issue in the New York's 19th district here?
Yeah, look, we have seen this across upstate New York. There's a lot of suffering because of it, and way too many tragedies. On my block or in my neighborhood where I grew up, we lost a whole bunch of jobs, and when you take economic opportunities out of a community, you end up seeing the poverty rates go up. End up seeing the opioid epidemic ripped through. One of my friends who I lived on one corner of the street. He lived over on the other corner. He was killed because of the opioid epidemic. A classmate of mine from high school, 2 blocks behind where I grew up, was killed because of the opioid epidemic. One of my best friend's moms was killed because of the opioid epidemic. So this hits close to home, and it's tragic, and it's got to stop. So we have for far too long in this country and in upstate New York underinvested in addiction services and mental health services and a whole host of other things that folks need to fight addiction. And we have to make the investments to make sure people have the beds that they need. I mean, one of the things I hear about so often from law enforcement is that they are so often responding to incidents where it's not necessarily criminal activity that they're responding to. It's a mental health crisis, or it's the consequences of addiction from somebody who wasn't able to get the services they need. And so one of the things I would like to see us do as a country is provide more funding for law enforcement and more funding for our justice system, so that people who are in crisis are able to get access to the services they need.
Another key issue for our voters here is the environment. We live in the Sullivan Catskills, northeast Pennsylvania area. It's known as home of Woodstock Festival. A lot of folks come up here to enjoy the rivers and lakes that we have. What are some of the policies you would either support or introduce to help further protect the environment in our 19th district?
Yeah, well, I'm really proud to be the candidate in this race who is endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters. I'm really proud to be the candidate in this race who's endorsed by the Sierra Club. Really proud to be endorsed in this race by the Natural Resources Defense Council, which, as you know, has very deep roots in Sullivan County. I'm the pro-environment candidate in this race. My opponent, you look at his voting record, he's voted to open up. One of the votes he took was on an amendment where the question was whether to allow drilling in the Delaware River Basin, and he voted the wrong way on that. He's taken a whole bunch of money from the fossil fuel industry. And so I don't think it's a surprise that he's been spending a lot of his time giving away subsidies and tax cuts to big oil, while at the same time cutting investments that we need in clean energy manufacturing across upstate New York. I see the threat of climate change as the existential threat facing our planet. I have 2 little kids, and a big part of the reason why I'm running for Congress is because I want them to grow up on a planet that's habitable. I also see it, because I see it as a crisis, I also see it as a huge economic opportunity for us to rebuild the middle class across upstate New York. It's what we've always done here. I mean, I'm really proud of our manufacturing roots in upstate New York, in neighborhoods like the one that I grew up in. And we are as well positioned as any community in the world to build the things the world needs to take on this challenge, to rise to this moment and to meet this moment. And so I have a vision of the economy across upstate New York in the future as the place where we're making the solar panels that the world needs to get solar power, making the batteries we need to save the sun when it's not shining and the wind when it's not blowing. That's the vision. We build the things we need to save the planet.
Let's talk about public safety. One of the concerns of public safety is bail reform. It's a very contentious topic in New York State, especially here in Sullivan County, of course, our 19th district. What is your stance on the current laws? Do you believe changes are needed?
I come from a law enforcement family. My mom worked for 20 years as a probation officer in Tioga County before finally retiring. Through the course of my career, I've supported law enforcement. I've brought Democrats and Republicans together to provide additional funding for our law enforcement. So I come at it from that perspective. I do think we need to take a really hard look at some of the laws that are on the books, make updates to those. Look, we can and we need to find the right balance between, on the one hand, we should not criminalize poverty in this country. We should not criminalize mental illness in this country. We should not criminalize homelessness in this country. At the same time, people who are a threat, people who are a danger, need to be off the streets and not causing harm. And so, I think judges need the discretion to make sure that people who are a threat are being detained appropriately, and it's something we should be constantly evaluating in conjunction with law enforcement.
Now, given the current polarization in Washington, how do you think you could approach working across the aisle, particularly issues like we talked about, healthcare, housing, inflation, and infrastructure that affects the 19th congressional district?
Yeah, so I'm a Democrat. I come from a Republican family. To this day, I couldn't tell you the political party of my neighbors on Bertzel Street. I was sitting on my next door neighbor from growing up. He helped raise us, and we were sitting on the porch, and he said the other day, "You know how it is, Josh, around here." And I'll tell you this: I know he's voting for me. I know he supports me. I don't know if he's a Democrat or Republican. He said, "You know, Josh, how it is around here. We're not really into Democrats and Republicans. We're just really angry at all of them." And I think that's kind of the sense. I think the divides in this country. Look, this is a very competitive and big congressional district, and one of the honors of my life has been traveling around and talking to people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different political views. And I'm leaving every day more inspired by who we are as upstate New Yorkers and Americans uh, every day. And I think if the only thing you knew about our politics was what you were watching on cable news every night, you would think we were hopelessly divided. And I get to go out and talk to people, and I know that that's not the case. I think the divide in this country is not between Democrats and Republicans. I think the divide in this country is between everyday people on the one hand and the powerful special interests and the corrupt political establishment on the other. And so when I'm out talking to people on the campaign trail every day about why I think we need term limits so that we can get some new leadership in our politics, talking to people about why I don't take any corporate PAC money because I think our political system is corrupt as hell and my vote's not for sale. When I'm out talking to people about why I'm pro-choice because I believe women can make their own healthcare decisions, why I support Social Security because you've earned it, those aren't issues that are dividing Democrats and Republicans. Those are issues where it's everyday people on the one hand and the special interests and the political establishment on the other. So that's the approach I'm going to take to this. Coming as a Democrat, coming from a Republican family, one of the things I learned above all else is give each other the benefit of the doubt. And you might disagree on the way to get to where you're going, but most of us want to get to the same place.
Yeah. Now, your opponent, Marc Molinaro, has really pointed out that what's happening in the southern border, what's happening with immigration at this point, he puts a lot of the blame on you, saying some of the policies, there are policies that you've done, but things you have supported in the past have really caused what's happening in the southern border. Do you have any response to that?
Well, he's wrong about all of it. He's wrong about all of it. He is the one who's been in politics for 30 years, and he is the one who's been in Congress for the last 2 years. And in the 2 years he's been in Congress, we've had over 4 million crossings at the southern border. And instead of actually doing something to solve the problem, he is just playing politics with it. There is a bipartisan bill that's supported by the Border Patrol Union, and it's sitting on his desk right now. And all he has to do is pick up a pen and write his name on it. and it would solve a lot of these problems. But he won't do that. And he won't do it because his boss, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, told him not to do it. And the reason Mike Johnson told him not to do it is because his boss, President Trump, told him not to do it. And the reason President Trump doesn't want to do it is because he wants to exploit this issue during the campaign season. It is so frustrating for so many of us to see politicians from both parties fail to do anything meaningful on this issue. So look, my plan I've been very clear about, and my opponent can lie about it all he wants, but I've been very clear on it. I think we need physical barriers along the southern border where it makes sense to have them. We need thousands of additional border patrol agents. We need to deploy the most cutting edge technologies to stop the fentanyl trafficking. And we need the politicians to stop screwing around and get serious about solving this problem. And that includes, first and foremost, my opponent.
Why should voters vote for you over your opponent?
Look, there's some real big differences between his policies and his record and mine. He's a 30-year career politician. I support term limits. He's taken nearly $1 million in corporate PAC checks, and you can draw a direct line from the challenges that families are facing across upstate New York to the votes that he's taking in Congress, and you can draw a direct line from the votes that he's taking in Congress to the corporate PAC checks that are getting stuffed into his pockets. I'm pro-choice. I believe women can make their own healthcare decisions. And one of the first things I'm going to do when I get to Congress is sign on to the Women's Health Protection Act to put Roe v. Wade back into law. My opponent voted 13 times to restrict abortion rights. He's been anti-choice for his entire 30-year career, and he's opposed Roe v. Wade. And I'm serious about solving the crisis at the southern border. I'm serious about fixing our completely broken immigration system, and I'm really frustrated with politicians from both parties who refuse to do it. My opponent, he's had 2 years to get the job done, and he refuses to do it because he thinks it's good for his politics.
We were talking to Josh Riley, Democrat Josh Riley, running for the Congressional 19th District against Marc Molinaro, Republican Marc Molinaro. Thank you so much, Josh Riley, for talking to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.